Dr. Laura, why do most people need help when it comes to communication and delivering their message?
Ironically, I think the easiest answer, and by the way, Daniel, thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this conversation with you and bring such an important topic to even more people.
My pleasure. Thank you for being here.
I think the easy answer to your question as far as why do people need to work on their communication is simply because we're frustrated. Right? If we are frustrated in feeling like we're clear in our ideas, what's important to us and why, and we're clear in how we feel about it, we're passionate about that, but we can't seem to get the other person to understand both, much less either one, then that's why. We like to say to ourselves that, oh, it's their fault. They're not listening. They don't get it. They don't understand. But the fact is, at least 50% of that responsibility is on us. It's our idea. We have to communicate it in a way that's not just accurate to what we're thinking and how we're feeling, but that's conveyed in a way that the other person is able to hear what we need them to hear in a way that they can hear it. And that's something that's not as intuitively obvious as most people would like to believe.
That's interesting because I feel that whether you are at a business meeting with friends, with your significant other, everyone has issues when it comes to communication.
Absolutely.
With delivering the message across, what are the main uh, mistakes or problems or issues you see from people when they fail to deliver the message?
You mean the kinds of mistakes that cause people to be unsuccessful in
Bingo.
delivering it?
Yes.
There's a lot of things that people tend to do, and it is, I think one of the biggest mistakes that we tend to make is that we think from something of a selfish perspective. And it's not that we're bad people. It's just a natural human tendency. Our thought is, I need you to understand this. I want to tell you this. I want you to accept this. So it's from our perspective. We don't tend to put forethought into trying to view things from the other person's perspective. Why can't they understand this? What other pressures might they have that would prevent them from being able to say yes, or prevent them from even being able to understand really why this is important, or why they should want it, what the value is? So if we don't stop and think first about what other conditions, experiences, pressures, preferences, comforts, or anxieties the other person might have around this, whether or not we had anything to do with it first, then we're just walking into a wall. The more we think first about other factors that would influence this person's ability to hear and understand what we need them to hear and understand, the clearer our path will be to move forward.
That's that's very interesting because I do feel that in whether in my personal relationships or at work, I feel that it should be so easy for the other person to understand, but from only from my point of view, not from their point of view. And I think it requires some level besides self-awareness, but also emotional intelligence to
Yes.
really, okay, let me take myself out of the equation and see how this person, because at the end of the day, if I'm trying to influence this person or persuade this person, not in a way to manipulate the person, but to help that person to see my point of view, I first need to see their point of view.
It absolutely helps. So, for example, if we wanted to ask someone to lend us money, and a friend, a parent, whoever it is, and we needed to do something we want to do on Saturday, but and we don't understand why they aren't giving it to us. Well, maybe we didn't think to ask, when's payday for you? If you don't get paid until next Monday because it's the first or the last day of the month or something, then sure, you wouldn't have the money to be able to lend to us, even if you wanted to. So to go in and just be demanding and say, well, why aren't you giving it to me? That's not very fair. It's not very considerate. And it's kind of silly to when there's a couple of simple questions could have helped to understand this other person's perspective.
Yeah, I guess a lot of people, when the other party doesn't get your message, or when your
Mhm.
message don't get across, people take that personally.
Yes.
It's not about the other person not wanting to agree with you. It's not about the other person in this case not wanting to lend the money to you,
Mhm.
but it's more about you need to understand how to navigate those what, because is we all feel that we should be that we're good at communicating just because we can express words,
Mhm.
just we can talk,
Yes.
right? It's the same thing with breathing. We feel that we're good at breathing when really we're not, and I'm be one of
Sure.
the first ones like struggle a lot. But as you mentioned about influencing others, we know that there's an art when it comes to persuasion and influence people, and not to be confused with manipulating people in general.
Correct.
So
Correct.
how important is it to how important is it how we deliver the message versus what the message really is when it comes to influencing others?
They're two sides of the same coin. You really can't have one without the other. And one of the most um, common myths out there is the expression that, well, it's not what you say, it's how you say it that matters. No, they're both equally important because I can say to you, well, Daniel, I just think your show's terrible. I mean, it's nothing personal, but it's terrible. It doesn't matter that said it nicely. That was a mean message. I would never say that. I think your show is
Yeah,
fabulous, by the way, which is why I'm here, of course. So, in
appreciate
case anybody's out there going panicking, Daniel, wait, it's terrible. No, it's not. It's a wonderful show. But see, that's exactly my point. It doesn't matter that I said it nice. The words themselves would have been hurtful if they were true, which of course they're not. So but when you think of the grammatical difference between it's not what you say, it's how you say it that matters. That's a general rule of thumb, which is incorrect. If someone in the moment says it's not what you said, it's how you said it that matters. That means, in that moment, I heard the words that you said. You said to me, you look fine. But your voice and your body language with the eye roll and with the flat, it doesn't sound like I look fine. It sounds like what you mean is, I don't care. This is stupid. Let's just go. I'm tired of waiting for you. Wear a paper bag if you want, but I'm leaving. Even though the three words you said were, you look fine. Because there was such a strong disconnect between what you said and how you said it, the person was willing to disregard the entirety of the message and infer all sorts of other meaning into the delivery. Now, that is also an example, and this is where the original research often gets misquoted as well. When you look at that example, you look fine. I said you look fine. It's 3 words, 5 words. There's not a lot of content to the message. So there's a lot more space to read meaning into the delivery. If you're going to give a half-hour presentation at work, there's a lot more words. There's a lot more data. So it's not like saying, well, if you don't present it well, they're not going to believe your slides. That's not what it's saying. In some ways, the slides speak for themselves, but the way people evaluate you as a presenter and whether or not they should take your advice and your interpretation, and how to interpret the data on the slides based on you as presenter, there's some room for skewing and tipping the scales against you, out of your favor. So there is a difference between lots of what you said and connecting how you said it versus 2 words, 3 words. When there's a minimum of words, a minimum of content, then all the more reason why how you say it is going to add that much more meaning and create that gap.
I had on one of my notes that specific phrase. It's not how you say it. It's not what you say. It's how you say it. And I'm glad you brought that up. And I could tell based on both examples that in one thing is it was important what you said, and the other one how you said it. when you mentioned that this show was terrible, even if you were going to give that kind of feedback, there are better ways of phrasing that, and that
Yes.
would be based on what you say. It's like, hey, you might want to improve or change these things here and there, and just make it shorter, longer, or whatever. There are ways how to give some level of criticism, but in a way that the person doesn't feel offended, and the person feels like, okay, this comes from a good place, comes from a place that it's this person trying to be helpful.
Yes.
On and on the second example, that right there is what happens a lot, both in person, when our words don't match our body language, but also, and I've seen that a lot when it comes to emails and text message.
Mm-hmm.
You might send a message in a particular way, but since the other person doesn't see your body language, then it's up to the person to create the story of, oh, maybe she's saying this way or he's saying it that way, and then we all we need the tonality, we need the body language to understand the complete message without misinterpreting that one
Mm-hmm.
per se.
Sure. And in situations like you mentioned with regard to constructive feedback, that's a very sensitive context. That's a very sensitive situation. And you mentioned earlier the importance of things like emotional intelligence. Well, okay, let's look at who you're giving the feedback to. If it's somebody who's very confident, doesn't take anything personally, just like, yeah, you're going to give me some suggestions on how to make the show better. Great. Let me know what it is. Okay, good. Thanks. And you're not going to hurt me. If you don't like my show, fine. I'm going to keep doing it anyway. You don't have to listen. I got lots of other people who love my show. Just tell me what it is. Don't walk on eggshells and beat around the bush. Just be clear.
Be direct.
Yeah. But if you know that the person you're talking to is very sensitive, maybe there's a power differential between them, or maybe they're really trying to impress you, or maybe they worked really hard on this and this is their baby and they're really nervous about it, then just a little bit of anything that's not perfectly praise positive, they're going to ignore all the positive stuff you say and just fixate on that one thing that wasn't perfect. And they're going to go home and beat themselves up for the next 2 weeks over it. You need to address that person very differently if you want them to hear all of what you mean, both your content and your intent, the way that you want it to land. So sometimes small differences in the words that you use make a big difference. So, for example, the difference between I had a thought, the show was great. I had a thought for how to make it better versus the show was great. I had a thought for how to make it even better. What's the
I feel
difference to you?
that the show is already good, but we can make it better with the second, the way that you phrase it the second time, how to make it even better sounds like, oh, what I'm offering right now is pretty good, and I'm going to take it to the next level, rather than, well, my show is okay, and now this person feels or thinks that I need to add all these things to make it better. Now, in my position, either or, I would just take it, me personally,
Hmm.
fine. But I know that other people might look into details. Okay, what did she mean by that? Does she mean that it's not good enough? Does she mean that it's awful? So I totally understand, and I think I like how you phrase things. And if we could phrase things in general, in many cases, we could have better communication, and we can hurt people less.
Yes. Yep. And I like the so you're someone who takes feedback very easily and you make it you don't take it personally, recognizing that that word even, you broke it down perfectly in that situation. One, if I don't use the word even, it was good, I have an idea how to make it better, is like, okay, was it really good or are you just being nice and you're trying to tell me that it wasn't really good so you want to fix it, versus even better, you said it exactly right, take it even to the next level. The even more makes it sound like the first part was actually a compliment, and we can go beyond that too. So I think that's a place where that one little word changed the interpretation of the whole first half of what you said. Do I believe you or do I not believe you? That the show was good just by adding that one little word. So words can impact other words as well.
I completely agree with you in that. And when you said about that, some people might not take a criticism, even if it's constructive, in a positive way, and you need to find a way how to rephrase it or reframe it, and how to make the other person see it. That is, and I'm guilty of this since I'm somebody who can take constructive criticism in a good way, because I can see from the other person's perspective. I might not agree with you, but I can see your point. Then I feel that not everyone should be like that, or everyone is probably like that. And when
Sure.
I've done that and I've landed the wrong way, I get frustrated at the person when I should get frustrated at myself for not
Hmm.
understanding how the person is. And that created a lot of problems with friends, in relationships, at work.
Yep.
And for many years I was frustrated. It's like, but I don't understand. I'm not coming from a bad place, but the person took it, and it was nothing wrong with me, or well, it was wrong with me with the message per se. Not it, I should have phrased it better. And I think that that is something that not many people do nowadays.
More people definitely need to, and I don't know that they ever did necessarily, but we're learning more now about how to do it well. And people like you are offering great shows like this, which provide the opportunity to make these changes much more conscious, much more intentional, and much more effective, because you're providing them with the tools to be able to make these changes, not just the knowledge that we should make the changes. I think I always say that the biggest gap in the world is the 3 inches between our brains and our mouths. That we know that we're supposed to do stuff. We know we're supposed to be diplomatic. We know we're supposed to work on these things. We know we're supposed to fill in the blank. But then we open our mouths and what's it supposed to sound like? I don't know in the moment how to make it happen with that person. So, how to turn that passive knowledge into active decisions and word choices and communication structures and connections with other human beings who are all different. That's the challenge, and that's why it's important to keep working on it.
Absolutely. And I feel that a lot has to do with uh, ego and selfishness. We feel, well, if somebody didn't treat me that way, why would I treat others the same way? What
Right.
why would I put the effort if nobody did it with me?
Yes. I think it was Mother Teresa who said, "Be the change you want to see in the world." Or it might have been Maya Angelou. It was some very wise person. I'll put it that way. But that will be the change you want to see in the world. You start. If everything's in a toxic situation, add good someplace. It's amazing that that's like watering the seeds.
Yep. And I mean, we just have to. And again, I'm trying to get better at it. I was horrible at it, but yes, it's and consciously comes from the self awareness we were just talking
Mhm.
recently.
Sure.
Create the awareness. People are not going to treat you the same way, but you start treating people the way that you want to be treated,
Mhm.
and you should be good. You mentioned on you talk about a lot about the 3 C's. What are those?
The 3 C's for me, for executive presence or leadership presence, but really it's in any context. I wrote it thinking about the a business application, but it's just as relevant in the personal space, is the ability to command the room, connect with the audience, and close the deal. Now that sounds very business-like, so let's break them down a little bit. C number one, command the room. That means, how do you captivate people's attention? When you start to talk, what makes them put down their phone or hit pause on the tablet or look up from whatever other conversation they were having, or it's the beginning of the meeting? Now let's focus. So, how do you, what is it about what you say, how you say it, how you stand, how you sound, all those pieces that gets people to pay attention to you? And to how do you maintain attention as well? Number two, connect with the audience. At some point, regardless of who you're talking to, I don't use the word audience meaning you're on a stage, but it can be one on one, it can be one to many, it can be virtual, it can be in person, at home, at work, wherever it is. What is it about the way that you're communicating with the individual or the group that allows them to feel like this person understands me and I understand him or her? How do you establish that mutual feeling of rapport and understanding and appreciation and recognition? And then the third C is close the deal. Again, that does not necessarily mean sale, signing on the dotted line. It means, how do we come to a mutual agreement? How do we figure out a way to just move the needle forward? How do we agree on what's the next step? Maybe the next step is just deciding that, you know what, we're getting a little emotionally heated right now. Let's go get lunch and let's come back when we have clear heads and full bellies and start over again. Or maybe it's that we are arguing about a particular point that's a hypothetical, and it's really going to depend on whether the somebody else decides yes or no on this one thing. So will we have this asset or not have this asset to work with? Let's get the answer to that first and then discuss what to do based on the reality, instead of arguing about, well, if he does this or if he does that, then what are we, do we have to argue about it? Should we, it's okay to have contingency plans, but is there a smarter way to move forward on this? Coming to that agreement, that just little progress, little by little. It's all about steps. So those are our 3 C's: command the room, connect with the audience, and close the deal.
So, as somebody who is an introverted, shy, and all of that,
Mm-hmm.
what are this is a probably like a 2-part question.
Okay.
When it comes to commanding the room, we feel, at least from my perspective, from people who are not as extroverted, who don't have like big personality, we feel like, well, how can we command a room? And this is, by the way, and this, as you said, it could be one-on-one, it could be with a group of 3 or 4 people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily need to be on a stage, but that would be just like, okay, I know it's a lot about self-confidence. It's one of the main things that help people command the room.
Mm-hmm.
But even connect, and that is first of how can people that not necessarily have the background or the experience or the personality of having that commanding presence can command a room, whether it's just one-on-one, whether it's like a 10,000 people um, stage. But the other part, when it says connect, is, we know, and I've talked a lot about on this podcast, is people's attention spans have been shortened a lot.
Yep.
How do you keep people engaged and connect when people's minds, even myself, I can go on a trip on my brain, and then and then you lose me completely. How do you deal with those nowadays, that it seems that it's getting worse and worse?
Well, I think you're right. It's a 2-parter. So let's break those down a little bit. So recognize, of course, that introversion and extroversion are not binary. It's not you are an introvert or you are an extrovert. It's not a light switch. It's a continuum, and different. It's about how people, shyness is not necessarily an introverted trait. It can be, but they're not synonyms. So it's about where you get energy, what depletes you of energy, how much time you need to think about something before responding to it, et cetera. There's many, many factors involved. And some of the best public speakers I know are natural introverts. So it's not a get out of jail free card for never having to speak in public to say, well, I'm an introvert, so I don't do that. Nope. You have the ability to be absolutely amazing and captivating in front of large audiences too. But there's a stereotype that the person with the command presence is the guy who's 6'2" and 240 pounds and built like a linebacker and has this booming voice like James Earl Jones or somebody else. And I don't have any of that. You can't tell by a lot of people will meet me after seeing my videos or meeting me on Zoom or something, and they're like, "Oh, look at you down there. Hi." I was like, "Let me guess, you thought I was bigger?" And they're like, "Yeah, kinda. I'm 5 foot nothing, and that's not part of." Nobody's going to look at me and go, "Oh my gosh, she might take my lunch money. I hope she doesn't beat me up on the playground." Like, that's not my position. And it's not about being loud either. There's a difference between demanding attention and commanding attention. You can yell and demand that you pay attention to me, but they may not. And they certainly won't respect you for it. They'll just comply at best. I emceed an event, a fundraiser for a nonprofit a little while ago. And of course, there were, a couple hundred people who were all milling around, socializing, networking, getting food, drinks, all that kind of stuff. And when the president of the organization said, "Okay, Laura, I think we need to try to herd the cats into the room, get everybody here to sit down and start." So I went to the podium and, I spoke into the microphone and I asked people to come. We're ready to get started. If you can wrap up your conversations, come and join us. We're ready to kick off the event. And I stood there and I waited. And little by little, people started coming in. And I, mentioned a little more, one or two final reminders to bring people in. But otherwise, it was standing there in silence. And the way I held it, and everybody came in. And when we were done, I went to check in with the president of the organization because there was a lot of stuff I had to do through the course of the evening. And she just said to me, "That was masterful." I said, "What part did what did you like about it?" She goes, the beginning. I mean, you told them to come in and sit down and be quiet, and they did it. That was the part she was most amazed about. It wasn't how I was, moderating the conversations or how I was managing the fundraising part of it or any of those. It was how I got people to sit down and stop talking by not talking. So there is a difference in how you hold yourself and the manner in which you connect with people that does not require a show of strength. Not in the forceful sense of strength. That's a different kind of an internal strength that does not demand respect, but something in the way that you hold yourself will naturally command it. And there's a time and a place for the other, don't get me wrong, but you don't have to be big, strong, loud, extroverted, call it what you will, to be able to do any of the 3 C's. We all have that power in us.
We just need to tap into them.
Learn how to, yes.
And how do people learn those skills? Because we can read all the books we want, we can watch all the videos we want, but we all know it requires practice, it requires
Yeah.
intention. But how do people start? What would be those small steps that people can start introducing into their life, into their routine, into their conversations that would lead them to better results that they can track and see? Oh, now I can see the improvement by just having these tweaks here and there.
I think one of the easiest ways to get clear on what's working and what's not working for someone is to video record themselves. So, of course, this conversation is going to be recorded, so I can go back and watch the video and listen to the audio to say, okay, where did I tell a story that I thought was interesting, but when I listened afterwards, I realized it actually got too detailed or too technical or to something else. I didn't. Now listening to it secondhand, listening to it after the fact, I'm much clearer on how often I said or whether I was looking up at the ceiling too many times trying to think of an answer as if magically the script were going to appear up there. Maybe you're on a phone call with somebody or you're on a Zoom with somebody. Can you take your phone, turn on your video and prop it up against the screen so that only you are going to see it? And you don't even need to watch the whole thing. You could watch 2 minutes just to get a little taste. Was I coming across as kind of bored and not engaged? Or was I coming across as a little bit nervous and talking too fast and stammering like this as I'm going through because I was trying to find the words that I wanted to say and before somebody else cut me off, so I didn't want to take too long of a. Did I sound nervous? Maybe you didn't realize it, but when you watch the video afterwards, you go, "Ooh, okay." Note to self: don't do that. And when you see and hear yourself in those recordings, believe me, the video doesn't lie. So it will make it exceptionally clear to you what you're doing that's undermining your own success. Because let's face it, Daniel, true or false, sometimes we're our own worst enemy.
I would say the majority of the time, in my opinion.
Yes. So when you watch the video, you get really clear on where, oh, maybe it's not their fault. Maybe I need to do this better. And you can't argue with it. You just see it. It's truth.
Which speaks to the point that, well, what can you control? Can you control how the person perceives or receives the message? No, you can only control how you deliver the message.
Correct.
So it is up to you to improve that area. But we tend to be very, as I mentioned before, selfish. It's like, well, this is who I am. This is how I talk. This is how I deliver a message.
Mm,
The person should be able to understand me. Not always.
correct.
When you mentioned about the video thing, I've been doing the podcast for the last whatever 5-6 months now, and
Yep.
I do all the editing,
Hmm.
and I have to be honest. So many times it's hard to watch myself. I cringe a bit. I see the mistakes I'm making.
Me too.
I tend to talk too fast because whether it's the anxiety or my thoughts, like I need to just get all the information out there before I forget. Too long, I tend to go in tangents, still trying to get better at it, and I upspeak a lot. It's something that you like to point out in whether in your TED talks or your uh, when you're coaching other people. We cannot fix all at once, right?
Right.
It's just hard. But what would you focus on first that you know that it will bring the biggest impact when it comes to communicating?
Great question. And I want to also put a pin in the idea of and go back in a moment to
Mm-hmm.
something you said, which is that we often say to ourselves, well, but this is me. This is how I am. This is how I talk. We'll come back to that.
Mm-hmm.
As far as picking priorities for what to work on first, I think the easiest answer, frankly, once you've watched a video, now, of course, as a podcast host, you watch a lot of these videos of yourself. I'm right there with you. But for anybody else who is just watching maybe the first time they've ever seen themselves on video, we all cringe, by the way. That's totally a normal human experience. I would just say, what bugs you the most? Because there's no right or wrong answer about what to work on first. But to the extent that something is most distracting to you, it is probably also most distracting to the other person. So figure out what's the distraction factor and then figure out a way to improve that. Then pick the next one. An alternative is when you think about, okay, what is my objective in this conversation? When I'm trying to be influential with my boss or with my teammates or with my brother or with my husband or with whoever it happens to be, then what is it in my what is the outcome that I want from this conversation with him or with her or with them? Do I want them to be excited about something? Do I know that they're a little nervous and a little hesitant, a little dubious on it? So I need them to trust me more. Do I need them to? What is the outcome that you want from them? How do you want them to feel? What do you want them to understand? What action do you want them to take? Okay, now let's look at how I delivered that message and say, what didn't help to get to that specific result? If that's your GPS, now you got to calculate the route, how to get there. So if I want this person to be really excited about this and to support my idea, but when I talked about it, I seemed kind of, nervous or hesitant about it, or maybe I just sounded really flat and I was trying to be factual and not, and I didn't realize that I was coming across this way. I don't sound excited about it. I don't sound confident about it. So why would I think they would be? It doesn't match. I'm not leading with what I want them to follow. So that would be one of the first things that I would work on if I realized, oh my gosh, I watched this video of myself and I sound like I'm scared of them. I sound like I don't believe what I'm saying. I sound like I'm daydreaming about something else while my mouth is talking about this topic. That's horrible. Okay, I got to fix that first. So what am I doing that's undermining my own success? That's where I would go.
Yeah, I felt call out on that example many times. I've done that. I've done when you feel that lack of confidence, it just start speaking low and monotone, and you just okay, let me put it out there very very carefully and hope for the best without showing that emotion that okay, this is where this is what I believe on. Whether you agree or not doesn't matter. It's
Yeah.
just my thing,
Right.
and I, well, personally, I need to get better at that. But yeah, every now and then after I say it, I was like, I did it again. I did it
We all
again.
have those moments.
Yeah.
Sometimes we hear stuff come out of our mouth and we wish we could reel it back in. But nope, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, as they
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
So can we go back to that
Yes.
that question about the this is
Totally.
me, that's not me? So
Totally.
I think those three words, something like this is me or that's not me, those are the words that get us in the most trouble because we're not so box finite. Well, this is me, that's not me. Those are my only options in the world. That's not the case. I want people to think about the way that you communicate as if in your brain, in your mouth, you have a DJ's mixing board. Have you ever seen a DJ's mixing board?
Yeah. So a lot, a lot of stuff in there.
Sure, you probably have
Okay.
one
Okay.
right in
Okay.
front of you now.
Okay.
And so it's full of dials and levers, and it's not just an on off switch. It's not just on or off power switch. It is, well, okay, which of these levers do I want to touch? Is it treble or bass or reverb or, and even within those, there's lots of different options. And should I slide it all the way up to 9 or nudge it back down to 7.2? So still keep it strong, but not quite that strong. It's not, I mean, I remember when I was in I don't know, middle school, probably a million years ago, I had a boombox. They were really popular back then, my radio. And there were three little levers for the graphic equalizer that was on it. I didn't know what any of them were for. I just moved them all up. I figured, well, more is better. It's music I like. And that's not the best way to make the sound because you're not going to play rock the same way you're going to play jazz, the same way you're going to play reggaeton or Beethoven. So you have to think about how do I need to adjust these levers in a way that's still me, but where there's a nuance involved. Just like the way you would get dressed differently. When you're hosting a podcast, you can be in jeans and a t-shirt, but if you're going to a formal event, you're going to wear a suit. If you're going to the beach, you wear a bathing suit. If you're going to the gym, you wear, sloppy workout clothes. It's still you. But it's you understand for this situation to meet these people, I need to dress my body a certain way. So this is my personal style of evening gown. This is my personal style of suit. This is my personal style of gym wear, but I know it's contextually appropriate. I'm not going to wear the gym clothes to the gala. That's not going to work. So we can adjust our voice and our delivery and our speaking style to meet the context in a way that's going to be much more effective while still being us and not just saying, well, that's how I talk. That's all there is to it. Because it's probably not. We do adjust.
Yeah. I feel that is a very simple way of seeing things, of even doing things. But the fact that it's simple doesn't mean that it's easy, and a lot of people struggle with that. It's just
Yes.
like okay, whether in any area of your life, you see that the ways of fixing, changing, improving the concept pretty simple, hard to do, and that one requires a lot of self control.
Mhm.
Requires a lot of self control. It's like how to have the emotional regulation, how to be
Yeah.
more in control. It's like okay, this is a person that is hard to deal with, and I'm struggling to get my message across. It's hard to do that, but I'm not going to get anywhere if I only put my, like bad guy suit. It's like, you know what? Just you need to listen to me or else. It's never gonna happen. Whether you're raising kids, whether
Hmm.
you're talking to your significant other, friends, co-workers, you name it.
Right.
So, Laura, you as a TEDx speaker yourself,
Hmm.
which and I've watched so many different TED talks, And it is interesting because I like different topics,
Sure.
and it's not about the topics that get the most views. Well, in some cases it is, but many times it's how the presenter shares their ideas. And yours is highly successful, almost 7 million views.
Mhm.
What advice would you give somebody who wants to stand on the stage and share their ideas effectively?
In a TED Talk specifically, or in any kind of a stage?
It could be TikTok or any kind of a stage, because I think it can be very similar, perhaps, or not.
Well, with a TED Talk, the one of the very specific features of that particular platform is that you have to have one core central message. And everything in your 8, 12, 18 minutes worth of your talk has to lead to that one key takeaway. So for people who want to be on a TED stage, they have to think, well, not just, well, I want to tell my story and I want to tell people how to do this better. That's okay, but what's the final destination? What's the main takeaway message that you want to be able to say? Anybody who listens to my talk, if they don't remember anything else, remember this. So start with that first, choose that first, and then back in and figure out what you want your story to be or what you want your talk to be. That's very different from a work presentation where you may have to do status updates and give lots of data and financials and analytics and all those kinds of things. But I think what is most important for both of those contexts and anyone goes back to something that I mentioned earlier. And that is, think first about the impact that you want to have on your audience. Very specifically, there's 3 levels of impact that we have in every conversation. There's an emotional impact, a cognitive impact, and a behavioral impact. An emotional impact is that in the end, you want them to feel something: excited, curious, concerned, calm, angry, happy, whatever you want. How do you want them to feel? Inspired, perhaps. Cognitive is, what do you want them to know? What do you want them to understand or to believe? Okay, so this is the fact of sorts. And then the third is, how do you want them to behave? The behavioral level of impact. What do you want them to do? What action do you want them to take? What do you want them to change for themselves in mental behaviors or physical behaviors, verbal behaviors? So at every conversation, every presentation that we make, we always encounter those 3 levels of impact. The problem is that the worst impact that you can have on people is none. So the best way that we can have the kind of impact we want is to plan first. TED Talk, business presentation, conversation with your mother, whatever it is, how in the end, how do you want them to feel? What do you want them to think or believe or understand? And how do you want them to behave? Make a conscious decision about that first, and then back up and decide the best path forward. What is your message going to be, and how are you going to deliver it to help them arrive there?
Dr. Laura Sicola, everybody. That was an awesome answer. That I can. There's so much information, so much to drag on there, and I think that is key and to understanding. And I've been having a wonderful conversation with you, and there's so many different topics that I wish we can talk about, but then we are running out of time. You have 2 books. You're a coach. You are a coach. You also uh, have your own podcast. Where can
Mhm.
people find you? Where can people work with you, buy your books, listen to your podcast?
Thank you, Daniel. Of course, my website is simply laurasicola.com. So feel free to take a look there. There's lots of resources. There's lots of um, other podcasts like this one will be there as well. my books, some of my online courses, those kinds of things are there. There's you can check me out on LinkedIn, and you can we'll share on in the show notes. I presume I'll give links for social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. There's probably a bunch of others that TikTok we're on now, and but LinkedIn is my primary where I post with all sorts of tips. And of course, on my website on laurasicola.com, you can always at the bottom, there's a link if you'd like to receive a weekly newsletter where I offer lots of tips on communication, announcements of the podcast, which is called Speaking to Influence. So feel free to check that out on Spotify or Apple or YouTube, your platform of choice. So lots of different ways to connect. And if you do connect with me personally, if you do reach out on LinkedIn in particular, please let me know that you heard me here talking with Daniel, because we want to know that you listen to us. And I want to be able to tell Daniel how incredibly valuable this conversation was for so many other people.
Yeah, appreciate it. Yes, and I'll add all of those to the video, show notes, YouTube description, all of it. And once again, thank you for being on the podcast. It was a total pleasure and a very insightful conversation.
Thank you for the invitation, Daniel. It was a pleasure to be here.